I got the call late that night, one of those shifts where everything feels quiet, too quiet. Dispatch told me there were complaints of strange lights and noises coming from an old farmhouse out in the country. I knew the place. It was one of those abandoned properties you pass by and don't give much thought to. Roof half collapsed, windows boarded up. Locals had their stories, but nothing ever stuck. I figured it was a couple of teens fooling around, or maybe squatters trying to stay out of sight. Nothing out of the ordinary. I pulled up, parked my cruiser at the edge of the long dirt driveway, and stepped out. The air was colder than I expected, and as I approached the house, the crunch of gravel under my boots was the only sound for miles. The house loomed, all dark wood and shadows. I clicked on my flashlight, scanning the area. Nothing. Just the wind pushing through the dry grass, making it sway. I've been doing this job long enough to know not to jump to conclusions. It was probably nothing, but still, something about the stillness made my skin prickle. As I got closer, I saw the front door was slightly open, swinging back and forth on its rusty hinges. "Police!" I called out. "Anyone in there?" No answer. I nudged the door open with my foot, and it creaked, one of those high, whining sounds that just stick in your ears. I kept my flashlight pointed ahead, and with my other hand, I rested on the grip of my gun, just in case. The place was pitch black inside, just faint beams of moonlight slipping through cracks in the walls. Walking in, I noticed the smell: dust, mold, that old wood scent like a place left to rot. My flashlight caught bits and pieces of furniture draped in sheets. Looked like nobody had been here in years. I kept moving through, my steps slow, careful. It wasn't until I reached the back hallway that I heard it, a shuffle, like someone moving around in the dark. I froze for a second, listening. "This is the police," I called out again, louder this time. "If you're in here, come out with your hands up." Silence. Then a faint thud above me. I tilted my head, listening. The sound came again, heavy, like boots on old floorboards. I flashed my light up the staircase leading to the second floor. The narrow steps disappeared into darkness, but I knew I had to check it out. I made my way up, one step at a time, each creak beneath me echoing through the empty house. At the top, I paused, scanning the hall. Empty rooms stretched out in both directions. No one in sight. I started with the first room on the right, nothing but an old bed frame and some overturned boxes. Next room, the same thing. I moved to the third, and as I shone my light into the corner, I saw it, a figure, just for a split second. I whipped my flashlight back, heart pounding. Nothing. Just a pile of old coats hanging from a hook. I let out a breath, felt my pulse slow, but something still felt off. Like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to move. I checked the last room. No one. But as I turned to head back downstairs, I heard the footsteps again, this time behind me, near the staircase. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just the open hall leading back to the stairs. My grip tightened on my gun. I started making my way back down, my eyes darting to every shadow, every open door. That's when the doors slammed. Not just one. Every door in that hallway slammed shut at once, the sound ricocheting through the walls. I flinched, instinctively raising my gun. I shouted, but the words came out hollow in the empty space. I stood there for a second, just listening, waiting for another noise, but everything was still. I felt this itch at the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I forced myself to keep moving, making my way down to the main floor. I needed to check the basement. It's where people hide when they don't want to be found. The stairs creaked as I descended, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The air down there felt heavier, colder. My light swept across stacks of old newspapers, tools, and a workbench covered in dust. In the corner, I saw a small, leather-bound book. I picked it up, brushed off the dirt. Looked like a journal, old and worn. Flipping through the pages, I saw entries about the house, a man who'd lived here decades ago, describing strange occurrences. As I read, I heard something again, a soft thud, like something moving upstairs. I paused, listening. It felt like every sound in that place had its own weight, like it was pressing down. The journal talked about lights in the night, shadows at the windows. The guy wrote about hearing footsteps, calling the cops, but no one ever found anything. Just like tonight. I kept flipping through the pages of that journal, my flashlight casting long shadows on the basement walls. The entries got worse, each one more frantic, like the guy was losing his grip. He wrote about hearing voices, seeing things in mirrors that shouldn't be there. The way he described it, it sounded like he was haunted, like the house had gotten inside his head. "They never believe me," one entry said. "The police come, but they never see it. But I know it's watching." I closed the journal, feeling that creeping unease again. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe he wasn't just another paranoid guy losing his mind. There was a pattern here, same complaints, same sounds, same feeling like something was just out of sight. I thought about how many times I'd been called to places like this, and nothing ever came of it. It was always the same. People swearing they saw something, heard something, but there was never any proof. But here, standing in that basement, surrounded by the past, it felt different. As I moved to head back upstairs, the steps creaked beneath me. I paused, listening for any noise, any hint of movement above. Nothing. I started climbing again, one step at a time. The air felt tight, like it was wrapping around me. Halfway up, I felt this sudden chill on the back of my neck. I whipped around, flashlight scanning the dark, but there was nothing, just the empty basement behind me. I forced myself to keep moving, telling myself it was just my nerves. I'd seen worse. I'd handled worse. When I got back to the main floor, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in, making you second-guess every little noise. I stood in the middle of the living room, turning in a slow circle, sweeping my flashlight across the walls. That's when I heard it again, footsteps above me. Heavy, deliberate. I aimed the beam at the staircase, watching, waiting for any movement. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice bouncing off the walls. No response. Just those steps, back and forth, like someone pacing. I climbed the stairs again, gripping my gun. I'd already checked these rooms. I knew they were empty, but the sounds kept coming, and I wasn't going to leave until I figured this out. The hallway stretched out, doors on either side. Each one felt like a threat, a place for something to hide. I pushed open the first door, empty. The next, same thing. The footsteps stopped, and that silence hit me harder than any noise. I waited, my breath slow, trying to catch any hint of movement. As I turned the corner, I spotted a mirror at the end of the hall. It was cracked, like someone had punched it years ago, and the reflection was distorted, warped. I approached, flashlight steady, and saw my own face staring back, but the angle didn't match. It was like the reflection was off by just a second, lagging behind me. I blinked, shook my head, and moved on, but the unease settled deep. It felt like the house was playing tricks. When I reached the final door, I hesitated. This was the only one I hadn't checked. My gut told me to leave it alone, but I pushed forward, swinging it open. The room was empty, just a small, dusty space with a single window. As I shone the light around, I caught a glimpse of something moving outside, just past the window. A shadow, too quick to make out any details, but enough to set my nerves on edge. I stared, trying to catch another look, but whatever it was gone. I stepped back into the hall, and that's when I heard a door slam downstairs. It was loud, like someone had thrown it shut with force. I rushed back down, my heart racing. The front door, the one I'd left open, was now shut tight. I pulled on it, but it wouldn't budge, like it had been locked from the outside. My mind raced. No one else was supposed to be here. How could it have closed on its own? My radio crackled, breaking the tension. "Jack, you there? We're getting reports of movement near your location. Is everything all right?" I grabbed it, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm here. There's something off in this place. Might need backup." As I waited for a response, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Another voice, faint, coming from the radio. It wasn't dispatch. It was whispering my name. I stood there, gripping the radio tight, listening to that faint voice whispering my name. It was distorted, like a bad signal, but I could hear it clear as day. "Jack," it repeated, dragging the word out like it knew me. I felt a chill, one that I couldn't just brush off. I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who is this? Identify yourself." Silence. The line went dead, leaving me with nothing but static. Dispatch was gone too. No response, no backup, just me and that crackling noise. I tried the door again, pulling with all my strength, but it was stuck. My instincts told me this wasn't right, that I needed to find another way out. I moved toward the kitchen, remembering the back exit. As I made my way through the dark, the floorboards creaked under every step. My flashlight flickered, struggling to stay on, and I cursed under my breath. If this thing died on me now, I'd be left blind in this place. In the kitchen, everything was old, stove rusted, cabinets hanging off their hinges. The smell of decay was stronger here, like something had been left to rot for decades. I scanned the room, looking for the door. It was there, just ahead, but the handle was missing. I leaned in closer, shining the light on it. That's when I noticed the scratches around the frame, deep, like someone had clawed at it, trying to get out. My mind raced. Maybe it was animals. Maybe. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I pulled at the door, hoping it would give, but it was sealed tight, like it hadn't been opened in years. That's when I felt it, like eyes on the back of my neck. I turned quickly, my light catching nothing but shadows shifting against the walls. "If someone's in here, you better show yourself," I yelled, my voice echoing in the tight space. But there was no response, just the flicker of my flashlight struggling to stay on. I decided to head back to the living room, trying to retrace my steps. Every corner I turned, it felt like the shadows were watching, shifting just out of view. I forced myself to breathe, to stay focused. I've been in worse situations, I told myself. But something about this house was different. It felt like it was moving with me, like it knew every step I was going to take before I even made it. As I reached the center of the room, my flashlight went out completely. I smacked it a couple of times, but it didn't come back on. I was left in the dark. I fumbled for my phone, turning on its light, and the screen barely lit up the space in front of me. The weak beam caught the edge of a mirror on the wall, a tall, thin one with a frame covered in dust. I approached it slowly, feeling that tension build. I've seen enough in my line of work to know when something feels off. When I got close enough, I held up my phone's light and my own reflection stared back. But there was a delay, like it was lagging behind my movements. I tilted my head one way, and the reflection did it a second later. My pulse quickened, and I blinked, stepping back. The reflection didn't follow. It stood there, staring back at me, eyes locked. I felt my breath catch as I watched, frozen. I couldn't look away. And then it moved, just slightly, enough to make me doubt what I was seeing. Its hand reached up, touching the glass, while mine stayed at my side. I took another step back, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't right. I turned away from the mirror, the urge to leave stronger than ever. I needed to get out, find a way back to my car, regroup. As I moved toward the hallway, I heard a loud crash behind me. The mirror. It had shattered. I spun around, phone light shaking in my hand, but all I saw were shards scattered across the floor. That's when the lights flickered back on, dim and yellow, filling the room with an eerie glow. For a moment, I felt a sense of relief, but it didn't last long. In one of the broken pieces, I saw something. A shadow, standing in the reflection, still and watching. I raised my phone again, shining it at the spot, but there was nothing there. Just my own reflection and the shattered glass. I backed away slowly, my eyes never leaving that spot. I took another step back, trying to steady my breathing. My flashlight flickered back to life for a split second, and that's when I saw it, something dark, standing at the far end of the hallway. It wasn't a shape you could easily define, more like an outline, almost human but off. It just stood there, motionless. I blinked, and the light cut out again, leaving me in that sickly yellow glow of the overhead bulbs. I aimed my phone back at the hallway, but there was nothing, just the empty space where I thought I'd seen it. "Get it together, Jack," I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. I've been on the job for over 15 years. I've dealt with all kinds of people, walked through crime scenes that make most folks sick. But this was different. It was like the house was playing games, testing how far I'd go before I called it quits. But I wasn't about to back down. Not yet. I started moving, slowly, phone light scanning every inch of the floor, the walls. I needed to find another exit, any way out. The hallway led me to a small study, papers scattered everywhere like a tornado had blown through. The old desk was covered in newspapers, most of them yellowed with age. One headline caught my eye: "Local man found dead in farmhouse." I grabbed it, scanning the article. The picture showed the same house, and the man in the photo looked tired, worn down. The story mentioned he'd called the police multiple times, claiming he was being watched. The officers didn't find anything, and weeks later, his body turned up. Cause of death, unknown. My grip tightened on the paper. It was the same story, same complaints. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, the one that said something was really wrong here. I shoved the paper in my pocket and glanced around the room. There was a door leading outside, partially hidden behind a heavy curtain. Finally, a way out. I moved quickly, pulling back the fabric, but the door was jammed. I rattled the handle, felt it shake, but not give. I kicked it once, then again, but it wouldn't budge. It was like the house was keeping me in, locking me in its grip. Just as I was about to try again, a loud crash came from the room I'd just left. It sounded like something heavy hitting the floor. I spun around, phone raised, my pulse quickening. The hallway was empty, but I could hear the noise, like furniture being dragged, scraping against the floorboards. I called out, "Who's there? Show yourself." My voice felt small, bouncing back at me in the tight space. I took a step into the hall, the sound getting louder, closer. My eyes darted from side to side, watching for any movement. The light from my phone barely cut through the dimness. I moved back toward the living room, every step careful, my mind racing with every possibility. Maybe it was just some local messing with me, someone who knew how to get in and out of the place without being seen. But that didn't explain everything. The mirror, the voice on the radio. As I reached the center of the room again, I noticed something off about the walls. The wallpaper, faded and peeling, seemed to shift, almost like it was breathing. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. It reminded me of stories you hear about old buildings, how they seem to come alive when no one's looking. I knew I was letting the fear get to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was aware, like it was reacting to my presence. The radio on my belt crackled back to life, and for a moment I felt relief. Maybe dispatch had finally picked up again, but the voice that came through wasn't one I recognized. It was low, almost too soft to make out. "Why are you still here?" it asked. I froze, the words sinking in. It wasn't a question, more like a warning. I raised the radio to respond, but the signal cut off, leaving just that static again. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the panic creeping in. I knew I had to stay focused. I headed back to the basement stairs, figuring if I could find another way out down there, I might stand a chance. But as I reached the top step, I felt the floor beneath me shift, like the boards were warping under my weight. I hesitated, my light sweeping over the space below, the darkness stretching out like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, flashlight aimed down. The dark seemed thicker there, like it was swallowing up the light. I knew better than to trust my eyes in a place like this, but my gut told me I had no choice. If there was any chance of getting out, it was down there. Slowly, I stepped forward, the wood groaning under my weight. Each step felt heavier, like the stairs were pulling me down. Halfway down, my flashlight flickered again. I tapped it, and it came back just enough to catch something, a shape moving across the far wall. Quick, but not quick enough. It was tall, almost human, but its arms, they hung wrong. My grip tightened on the light, and I froze, straining to see more, but it vanished into the dark. My mind raced. "It's just shadows," I told myself, trying to push down that rising dread. Just tricks. I reached the bottom, scanning the room. The basement stretched out longer than I remembered, filled with old furniture covered in sheets, boxes stacked high like walls. I kept the flashlight steady, inching forward, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But I had to find a way out. I moved past an old dresser, its drawers half open, spilling out papers and yellowed photographs. I glanced at one, a family portrait, faces blurred, like they'd been wiped away. I shoved it aside, focusing on the exit. Ahead, I spotted another door. This one was metal, rusted and bolted, but it looked like it led outside. I felt a flicker of hope. I reached for the handle, pulling hard, but it didn't move. I yanked again, feeling the strain in my arm. That's when I heard it, a voice, low and familiar. "You shouldn't be here." I whipped around, flashlight darting through the shadows. No one. The voice, it was mine. I knew it. The same tone, the same pitch. A cold sweat broke out on my neck. I backed away from the door, feeling the walls closing in. My eyes darted around, searching for anything, anyone. The shadows seemed to stretch, shifting as I moved. I aimed the light at every corner, every crevice, but all I saw were those piles of old furniture. And then, the beam caught something. It was my reflection again, in a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. This time, it wasn't lagging, it was moving in sync. But it wasn't right. The eyes, my eyes, were empty, just black hollows staring back at me. I felt my breath catch as the reflection tilted its head, lips curling into a grin that wasn't mine. "Why did you come here?" it said, and I could feel my own voice, twisted, echoing through the room. I took a step back, my hands trembling. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I turned to run, but the boxes behind me toppled over, blocking my path. I stumbled, catching myself just before falling. My light fell, skittering across the floor. Darkness swallowed me. I scrambled for the light, hands shaking, and when I got hold of it, I pointed it at the mirror. The reflection was gone, but the whisper, that low, mocking tone, it was all around me now, repeating my name over and over. I pushed forward, shoving boxes aside, forcing my way back to the stairs. I climbed 2 steps at a time, feeling the walls close in. The voice followed, getting louder, overlapping with itself, like 100 whispers echoing through my head. "You knew. You always knew." I reached the top, slamming the basement door behind me, my hands shaking as I locked it. I took a breath, pressing my back against the door. But the whispers, they didn't stop. They were coming from every corner of the house now, growing louder, mixing with the sounds of footsteps and scraping. I felt trapped, like the walls were alive, pushing in. I grabbed my radio again, trying to call for help, but all I got was static. And then, clear as day, my own voice came through. "It's too late, Jack." I froze. I looked at the photos in my pocket, pulling them out. The one of the old man, the one from years ago. It wasn't his face. It was mine, staring back, eyes black as the night outside. I spent years working homicide, and trust me, most of the time, things are exactly what they seem. Someone dies, you find the reason, you put the pieces together. Case closed. But every now and then, you stumble upon something that doesn't quite fit. Something that keeps you up at night, even years after the fact. I'm not one for superstitions or ghost stories. I like facts, evidence, things that add up. But some things, well, they linger, whether you want them to or not. Let me explain. Part of my job back then was investigating suicides. We approached every one of them as if it could be a homicide, because you never know. We'd search for signs, a note, a history of depression, any hint of a motive. Most of the time it was straightforward. The clues were there, easy to piece together. But every so often, you'd get these cases where nothing made sense. Healthy people, happy families, stable careers. No note, no warning, just gone. Those are the ones that stick with you. I remember one in particular. It was a young guy, mid-30s. Good job, nice apartment, no signs of struggle. He'd hung himself in his bedroom. There was no note, nothing. His family was devastated, and they swore up and down that he had no reason to do it. We did our sweep, checked the place thoroughly, and nothing felt off, until I saw it. A small wicker lighthouse sitting on the nightstand, painted white and blue. It caught my eye, but I shrugged it off. People have all sorts of things in their homes. No big deal. A few weeks later, I got called to another scene. Different part of town, similar situation. The victim was a woman, early 40s, found in her living room. Same deal, no note, no motive. Her husband was out of his mind with grief, and nothing in the apartment stood out. Except, there it was again. That same lighthouse, sitting on a shelf near where she died. Same design, same colors. I remember pointing it out to one of the officers on scene. He just laughed, said it was probably a coincidence. But I remember feeling a chill, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. By the third time, it wasn't funny anymore. Another victim, another unexplained suicide, and that damn lighthouse again. It was almost identical, positioned like it was meant to be seen. I knew I'd seen it before, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't random. I went back to the station and pulled up the photos from the previous scenes. Sure enough, in the background, that same lighthouse showed up. It wasn't always in focus, but it was there. Every single time. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was just a popular decoration. Maybe it was something people liked to collect, and it was a coincidence. But as much as I tried to convince myself, it didn't sit right. I couldn't find that lighthouse in any local stores. I even asked around, but no one seemed to know what I was talking about. It's like it only existed in those apartments, in those moments. I mentioned it to my captain once. He gave me that look, the one that says, "Don't dig too deep." Homicide's a tough gig, and sometimes you have to accept that you won't have all the answers. But the lighthouse thing, it kept me awake. I'd go through the photos again and again, trying to find a pattern, anything that connected these people beyond that decoration. There wasn't. Different ages, different backgrounds, no connection whatsoever. Eventually, I let it go. I transferred out of homicide a few months later, moved on to a different department. But every now and then, I think back to those cases. I picture that lighthouse, perfectly placed, like a quiet observer. It's one of those things you can't explain. Maybe it was nothing, just a coincidence, right? But I'll tell you this, if I ever see that lighthouse again, I won't shrug it off. Years went by, and I'd almost forgotten about those cases. I was working in the missing persons unit by then, tracking down runaways and cold cases. It's different work, less gruesome, but it still gets under your skin. Every so often, you get a case that reminds you why you started doing this job in the first place. It pulls you in, and before you know it, you're losing sleep again, staring at evidence that doesn't add up. One night, we got a call about a missing woman. Her husband reported her after she hadn't come home from her evening walk. Seemed routine at first. We interviewed him, the neighbors, friends, same as always. Nothing stood out until we went to their house. I walked through the front door, and something felt familiar. The place was tidy, clean, like they'd been living a quiet life. Then, in the corner of the living room, I spotted it, a small lighthouse sitting on a side table, painted white and blue. My heart sank. I thought about all the times I'd seen that thing before, and for a split second, I almost said something. But I held back. Maybe it was just me connecting dots that weren't there. It's easy to let your mind play tricks when you've been on the job too long. Still, I took a picture of it, just in case. I didn't know why, but something told me it was important. We combed the area, put out missing posters, the whole 9 yards. Weeks passed, and there was no trace of her. The husband was frantic, calling us daily, hoping for any news. I tried to reassure him, but I knew the odds. Most missing adults either show up on their own or we find them in less than ideal conditions. But this one was different. No signs of foul play, no reason for her to run. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. One evening, I was reviewing old case files at my desk, trying to clear my head. Out of habit, I pulled up those photos from years back, the suicides with the lighthouses. I hadn't looked at them in ages. As I stared at them, a pattern started forming. Each time, the lighthouse was positioned in a spot where you couldn't miss it. It was always in the line of sight, like it was meant to be seen. The more I stared, the more it felt like the same object, not just a similar one. I went back to the house the next day, saying I needed to follow up on a few details. The husband was too distracted to question me, so I wandered through the rooms. I found myself staring at that lighthouse again. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands, trying to see if there was anything off about it. It felt heavy, solid. Nothing strange at first glance. But then, I noticed something. Tiny numbers carved into the base. Barely visible unless you knew where to look. That was the moment things shifted for me. I wrote the numbers down and handed the lighthouse back. I don't know what I was expecting, but when I got back to the station, I ran those numbers through every database we had. Nothing. They didn't match any serial numbers, addresses, nothing at all. It was like they meant something, but only if you had the key. I couldn't shake it, so I started digging deeper, looking into old records, even going through files from other precincts. I reached out to a few contacts who owed me favors, trying to find anything on these lighthouses. Most folks thought I was overthinking it, said it was just a coincidence. But one guy, an old detective I'd known for years, went quiet when I mentioned it. He told me he'd seen the same lighthouse once, back in the 90s. Same situation, no note, no motive, just a clean scene and a lighthouse that didn't belong. That's when I knew I wasn't imagining things. The cases were spread out across the state, different towns, different years, but there was a thread. Something connecting them, something we were all missing. I asked him if he still had the files from that case, but he hesitated. Some things, he said, are better left buried. It felt like a warning, and for a second I thought about letting it go. But you can't unsee something like that. Once you know it's there, it's hard to look away. I started feeling paranoid, like I was being watched. Every time I drove home, I'd check my rearview mirror more than usual, scanning for anyone who might be following me. I'd catch myself staring at street corners, half expecting to see that lighthouse propped up somewhere, waiting. Maybe it was just stress, but I knew I had to keep digging. Something about those numbers, it felt like a code, like there was more to the story. I wasn't sure where it was leading, but one thing was certain. I couldn't walk away now. After that conversation with the old detective, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was onto something much bigger than just a missing persons case. The lighthouse wasn't just a coincidence, it was a pattern. But what I didn't know was how far it went or who else was involved. I started pulling files from every department I could access, looking for anything similar. It was like piecing together a puzzle, and every time I found another connection, it felt like a small victory. But with each new piece, the picture got darker. One night, I stayed late at the station, combing through boxes of cold cases. The place was empty, the only sound coming from the hum of the old lights above. I found another file, this one from 1997. Same details, a woman found in her home, no signs of struggle, a lighthouse placed on the coffee table. The report mentioned nothing unusual about it, just another unsolved case. I knew it was important. I scanned the pages, looking for anything that stood out. There, in the officer's notes, was a detail that made my skin crawl. The numbers carved into the base matched the ones I found. I leaned back in my chair, staring at those numbers. It was clear now, they weren't random. But what did they mean? I thought about calling the old detective again, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way he warned me. I didn't want to drag him into this if it was as dangerous as it seemed. So I decided to dig on my own. I started visiting the locations tied to each case, seeing if there was anything people had missed. The first place I visited was an old house, the site of the 97 case. It had been abandoned for years, boarded up and forgotten. I pushed my way inside, the door creaking under the pressure. The air was thick with dust and decay, the kind of place that makes you feel like you're walking through someone else's memories. I searched the living room, picturing the scene as it was in the photos. The table where the lighthouse once sat was still there, covered in grime. I felt around, hoping for some hidden compartment or clue. Nothing. As I walked through the rest of the house, I kept hearing a faint creak, like someone shifting their weight on old floorboards. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the place settling. But then it happened again, closer this time. I froze, listening. My instinct told me to get out, but my curiosity pushed me forward. I followed the sound to a small, narrow hallway leading to the back of the house. A door at the end was slightly ajar, like someone had been in a rush to leave. I stepped inside, and the room was empty, no furniture, just bare walls. But there on the floor was another lighthouse, identical to the one I'd seen before. It was facing me, almost like it had been placed there intentionally. I crouched down, inspecting it closely. The same numbers, carved in the same spot. But this time, there was something else, a tiny piece of paper tucked underneath. I pulled it out, unfolding it slowly. Written in shaky handwriting were the words, "Do you see it too?" I felt a chill run through me, but I kept my composure. Someone else had been here, someone who knew about the lighthouses. Maybe they were trying to warn me or reach out. I took the paper, slipping it into my pocket. As I stood up, I heard the creak again, this time from behind me. I turned, expecting to see an empty room, but something felt off. It was like the shadows had shifted, closing in. I didn't stay to find out. I backed out of the room and left the house, locking the door behind me. Back at the station, I laid out everything I had, photos, reports, that piece of paper. It was all connected, but the message was still unclear. Who was leaving these lighthouses? Why the numbers? And what was the significance of "Do you see it too?" It felt like a game, one I wasn't sure I wanted to play. But I had to keep going. There were too many unanswered questions, too many people unaccounted for. I started asking around, checking with old contacts, even ones I hadn't spoken to in years. Most of them thought I was chasing ghosts, but a few mentioned similar cases, objects left behind, small clues that seemed meaningless until you looked closer. A few suggested it was a signature, like a calling card. Others said it was a message. Whatever it was, I knew it was intentional. As the days went on, I noticed things started happening around me. Phone calls with no one on the other end, lights flickering at my apartment, small items going missing. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia, but the timing was too precise. Someone knew I was digging, someone was watching. The tension was mounting. I couldn't ignore the feeling that someone was watching my every move. Each night, I found myself jumping at every little noise, every flicker of light. I'd pull out that piece of paper again, staring at the words, "Do you see it too?" It felt like a riddle, taunting me. Was there something more? I kept asking myself what I was missing. The deeper I dug, the more I felt the walls closing in around me. It was exhausting, but I couldn't turn back now. One evening, after another day of chasing leads, I decided to grab a drink at my usual bar. It was a small place, familiar faces around me, but tonight, everything felt off. The chatter seemed louder, the laughter more jarring. I took a seat at the end of the bar, nursing my drink and trying to think straight. A couple of regulars chatted beside me, their voices blending into a murmur, but then I heard something that caught my attention, a mention of the lighthouse. I leaned in. "Did you hear about the guy who went missing last week?" one of them said. "He was last seen near the old lighthouse out by the cliffs." My heart raced. I turned to them, trying to sound casual. "What do you mean? Just disappeared?" "Yeah, no signs of a struggle or anything. Just gone," another voice chimed in. "They say he was obsessed with that place, spent all his free time there." That struck a chord. Was he another victim of whatever was going on? I knew I had to find out more. As the night wore on, I could feel a knot forming in my stomach. It was like the universe was throwing me a lifeline, but I was too tangled in my own thoughts to grab it. I needed clarity, a way to connect the dots without losing my mind. I paid my tab and headed home, trying to piece together what I'd learned. The next day, I visited the lighthouse. The ocean crashed against the cliffs, waves roaring with a ferocity that matched my growing anxiety. Standing there, I could almost hear the whispers of those who had come before me. I approached the structure, a tall, weathered sentinel against the sky. I ran my fingers over the cold stones, tracing the letters carved into the surface. They were familiar but disjointed, fragments of a story that felt unfinished. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of salt and mildew. I climbed the winding stairs, each step echoing in the emptiness. At the top, I peered out at the vast ocean, the wind biting at my cheeks. I thought about the man who had disappeared. What could have driven him to this place? What had he seen? A sudden realization hit me. Maybe he had found something. In that moment, I felt the weight of all the cases I'd uncovered. They weren't just numbers or names. They were lives cut short, stories left untold. As I stared out at the horizon, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something monumental. The lighthouse felt like a portal, a gateway to the unknown. Was it protecting secrets or hiding horrors? Suddenly, my phone buzzed, breaking my reverie. It was a message from an old colleague, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Heard you're looking into the lighthouse cases. Be careful. Some things are better left buried." A chill ran through me. It was the second warning in as many days, and it made me question my next move. I felt torn. Was I close to the truth or stumbling into danger? The idea of backing away crossed my mind, but then I remembered the faces of those who had been lost. I couldn't just walk away. With a deep breath, I made a decision. I would confront whatever lay ahead, even if it meant facing my fears head-on. As I left the lighthouse, a sense of purpose ignited within me. The answers were out there, waiting to be discovered. I felt restless after my visit to the lighthouse. Something was gnawing at me, a sense of urgency pushing me to uncover the truth. I flipped through old case files late into the night, each page revealing another piece of the puzzle. Names, dates, and eerie coincidences began to blur together. There was a pattern, but it was so subtle, hidden between the lines. I needed a fresh perspective. A friend, Mia, had always been good at seeing what others missed. She had a knack for digging deeper and had helped me on more than one case. I called her, my voice tense. "Mia, can you meet me? I think there's something I'm not seeing." Her response was immediate. "Absolutely. Where?" I felt relief wash over me as we set a time to meet at a cafe I loved. The clinking of cups and the hum of conversation usually made me feel at ease, but that day, It felt more like a countdown to something inevitable. When she arrived, I slid the case files across the table. Look at these. There's something off about the timelines. Mia's brow furrowed as she flipped through the papers, occasionally glancing up at me. Why do you think the lighthouse is significant? I leaned back, recalling the man who vanished. He was obsessed with it, and now he's gone. What if he found something? Mia nodded, her expression serious. Let's dig deeper. There might be connections we haven't explored. Together, we combed through the details, cross-referencing everything we could. It felt like we were peeling back layers of an onion, each layer revealing something darker and more complex. The more we uncovered, the more I realized how many had been drawn to that lighthouse, like moths to a flame. Then I stumbled upon an old newspaper clipping. Mia, look at this. I held it up, my heart racing. It detailed a shipwreck off the coast decades ago, just a few miles from the lighthouse. The survivors claimed they saw something in the water before the storm hit, something unnatural. The tension in the air thickened. What if the lighthouse is a beacon, not just for ships, but for something else? As I spoke, I could see the realization wash over Mia's face. You're saying that whatever is out there is tied to the lighthouse? I nodded. It makes sense. The disappearances, the obsessions, they're all connected. We shared a look, an unspoken understanding passing between us. This was more than just a missing persons case. It was a chilling cycle of events that demanded to be unraveled. With our hearts racing, we decided to visit the lighthouse again, this time together. I felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation as we approached the weathered structure. The ocean churned violently against the cliffs, echoing the turmoil within me. As we entered, I could hear the faint sound of footsteps on the stairs above, a reminder that we were not alone. I glanced at Mia, her eyes wide with both fear and determination. We need to find out what's up there, I whispered. We climbed the spiral staircase cautiously, each step creaking beneath our weight. The air grew colder as we ascended, a tangible shift that made my skin crawl. When we reached the top, we stepped out onto the observation deck, the view stretching endlessly before us. But there was something more, the faint outline of a figure standing at the edge, gazing out at the tumultuous sea. Mia, look, I pointed, my voice trembling. But when we approached, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving only a lingering sense of dread behind. I felt my heart pounding as I scanned the area, half expecting to see the man who had disappeared. This isn't right, I muttered, shaking off the chill creeping up my spine. And then it hit me. This lighthouse wasn't just a place of light, it was a gateway to something unfathomable. We had crossed a threshold we couldn't come back from. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, a message lighting up the screen. It was from an unknown number. Stop looking. You'll regret it. I glanced at Mia, and for the first time, I saw fear reflected in her eyes. We had opened a door, and I wasn't sure if we could close it again. As we hurried back down, the weight of our discovery settled in. Whatever lived in the shadows of that lighthouse wasn't finished with us yet. The night felt darker, the ocean's roar more ominous. I could sense we were being drawn into a deeper mystery, one that held secrets far beyond our understanding. The thrill of the chase was still there, but now it was tinged with the reality of what we might uncover and whether we were ready for it. The summer nights had a way of tricking me into thinking every call would be routine. I sat in the passenger seat of the ambulance, the hum of the engine a familiar comfort. My partner, Mark, was behind the wheel, his hands gripping the steering wheel as we navigated the twisting country roads. The world outside was a blur of dark fields and the occasional silhouette of trees. I glanced at the dashboard clock. It was late, nearing midnight. Most people were asleep, unaware of the challenges we faced out here. We received a call for an emergency at a remote farmhouse. The voice on the radio crackled with urgency, sending a wave of adrenaline through me. My heart raced, not from fear, but from the thrill of the unknown. Rural areas like this held their secrets, and tonight we were about to uncover one. I had worked these back roads enough to know that danger often lurked where the light couldn't reach. As we approached a sharp right turn, something caught my eye. I leaned closer to the window, squinting to get a better look. A figure moved through the grass beside the road. It darted swiftly, gliding over the terrain like it was floating. My mind raced. Who would be out here at this hour? I could hardly believe my eyes. Was it a local, a lost traveler, or was it something more sinister? Mark didn't notice it at first, but I couldn't take my gaze away. The figure reached a tree and stopped abruptly. I felt a strange sense of unease settle in my stomach. As we passed, I turned my head for a clearer view. The man stood there, completely still, and as our headlights illuminated him, I saw he wasn't holding anything. No bike, no backpack, just a silhouette in the dark. My hair stood on end. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the tension palpable in the cramped space of the ambulance. Mark shot me a quick glance, confusion evident in his eyes. "See what?" he replied, brow furrowing. "That guy by the tree. He looked strange." I could sense his skepticism. He laughed lightly, trying to dismiss my concerns, but the unease lingered. It was hard to shake off the image of the man standing there watching us pass. I tried to shake it off, but the moment hung in the air. My thoughts churned. Could I have imagined it? Was fatigue playing tricks on my mind? The long hours and stressful calls often blurred reality. But this felt different. The way the figure moved, how it seemed to float, sent chills down my spine. It reminded me of stories I had heard from colleagues about strange encounters in isolated areas. I never thought I'd be part of one of those tales. As we drove further down the winding road, my focus shifted back to the emergency at hand. I could hear the crackle of the radio in the background, but my mind was still replaying the encounter. It felt like a scene from a horror movie, the kind where you want to scream at the characters to run. I wondered if we were stepping into something we wouldn't fully understand. The radio crackled again, pulling me from my thoughts. We were close to the farmhouse now. I could see the flicker of lights in the distance, a beacon amidst the darkness. Yet the feeling of dread clung to me, like a shadow refusing to let go. I stole another glance back down the road, half expecting to see that figure again. But nothing, just the empty stretch behind us. Mark made a sharp turn onto a gravel driveway leading to the farmhouse. As we parked, the headlights illuminated a weathered building, its paint peeling and windows dark. I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling as we stepped out of the ambulance. Something was off. A sense of foreboding crept into my thoughts. Little did I know, the real horror was just beginning, and that encounter was only the tip of the iceberg. As we stepped out of the ambulance, the gravel crunched under our boots, breaking the eerie quiet of the night. The house loomed ahead, its darkened windows like vacant eyes watching us. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the strange feeling from earlier. Mark grabbed the medical bag, and I followed suit, though my mind was still racing. The call had been urgent, and I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. "Let's get this sorted out quickly," Mark said, his voice steady but low. He shot me a glance, his expression half serious, half joking. "Maybe we'll get lucky, and it's just a cat stuck in a tree." I chuckled, appreciating the attempt to lighten the mood, but it didn't fully ease my anxiety. Out here, far from any hospital, every call had a level of unpredictability that made my heart race. As we approached the front door, I noticed the peeling paint and the overgrown weeds that surrounded the house. This place had seen better days, that was clear. Mark knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness. After a moment, we heard a faint voice call out, barely audible. "Come in." It was shaky, filled with uncertainty. I exchanged a look with Mark, and we stepped inside, prepared for anything. The interior was dimly lit by a single lamp in the corner. It flickered, casting shadows on the walls that danced like restless spirits. I scanned the room, noticing scattered belongings and the disarray that told a story of neglect. "Where's the patient?" I asked, moving further inside. The voice came again, this time more frantic. "In the back! Please hurry!" Without thinking, I moved toward the sound, my instincts kicking in. Mark followed close behind, his expression tense. As we walked through a narrow hallway, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Each step seemed heavier than the last. It was strange to think how a home could feel so foreboding. My heart thudded louder, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. When we reached the doorway at the end of the hall, I hesitated. The room was dark, and the voice was now muffled. "Is anyone in there?" I called out. No response came. just silence. I exchanged a quick glance with Mark, and he nodded, ready to push forward. "Let's check it out," he urged. We stepped inside, and the smell hit me first. It was a mix of decay and something else, something I couldn't quite place. I flicked on my flashlight, and the beam sliced through the darkness. The room was empty, except for an old mattress in the corner and a small table covered in dust. "What the hell?" I muttered, confusion washing over me. "Where's the patient?" Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an answer. The urgency that had driven us here vanished, replaced by an unsettling calm. As we scanned the room, I felt my heart race again. This wasn't right. Something was very wrong. I turned to Mark, who looked equally perplexed. Before we could react, the front door slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the house. I jumped, adrenaline surging again. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. Mark nodded slowly, his eyes wide. "Yeah, we need to get out of here," he said, edging toward the door we had just entered. But it wouldn't budge. Panic washed over me as I tugged at the handle, but it was locked tight. I looked back at the empty room, the shadows closing in around us. The silence was deafening, almost mocking. My mind raced back to that figure by the tree. Was this all connected? I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. But by whom or what? My instincts screamed at me that we were not alone in this house. The urgency of the situation pressed down on me, but I knew I had to stay focused. "We need to find another way out," I said, my voice barely breaking the thick tension in the air. Mark nodded, and we turned to search for another exit, the oppressive silence hanging heavily around us. Little did we know that the true horror was just beginning to unfold. Panic gripped me as I dashed down the hallway, heart racing. "We need to check the back door," I shouted over my shoulder to Mark, who was still trying to wrestle with the front entrance. I glanced back at him, and the worry etched on his face only fueled my fear. The weight of this house, with its peeling wallpaper and dark corners, felt like it was closing in on us. I could almost sense a presence lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. As we approached the kitchen, I hesitated at the threshold. It was a small room, but the shadows seemed to stretch across the walls. A heavy wooden table was covered in grime, and a faint smell of something rotting hung in the air. "What do you think happened here?" Mark whispered, his voice barely above a murmur. I shrugged, unsure how to explain the unsettling feeling that gnawed at me. "Maybe it's just a bad scene," I replied, trying to sound casual, but I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. Then I spotted it, a door at the far end of the kitchen. It looked worn, like it hadn't been opened in ages. "That could be our way out," I said, feeling a flicker of hope. Mark nodded, and together we made our way toward it, every step echoing off the tiled floor. As we approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a heaviness in the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Mark reached for the handle, and I braced myself, ready to bolt if necessary. He turned it slowly, the creak of the hinges sounding like a warning. "On 3?" he suggested, glancing back at me. I nodded, and together we counted. 1, 2, 3. We flung the door open, but the sight that greeted us froze me in place. The room beyond was filled with discarded furniture and old boxes. Faded photographs lined the walls, their subjects looking lost and forgotten. "This is just another storage area," Mark said, disappointment dripping from his words. I stepped inside, scanning the clutter for any sign of an exit. My heart sank as I noticed a single photograph hanging askew on the wall. It caught my attention, the image of a woman staring back at me with hollow eyes. "Who is she?" I wondered aloud, taking a step closer. Mark followed, and as we both stared, I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't just the photograph that unsettled me, it was the sense of recognition creeping in. The woman looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "It's probably just someone from the neighborhood," Mark suggested, but I could tell he was lying. The air felt charged, as if we were being watched, and the photograph seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. Suddenly, the house creaked loudly, jolting us from our thoughts. I turned sharply, half expecting to see someone standing behind us, but the room remained empty. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Mark nodded, eyes wide. "Yeah, let's keep moving." The urgency in his tone pushed me forward, despite the dread settling in my chest. We searched through the clutter, looking for a window or another door. Each item we touched felt like a link to something darker, a remnant of a life long abandoned. "What happened here?" I muttered, pulling open a box filled with dusty toys. Mark glanced at me, his expression grave. "I don't know, but we shouldn't stick around to find out." Then I heard it again, the soft creak, like footsteps echoing in another room. My heart pounded as I turned to face the doorway, scanning for movement. "Mark," I started, but he was already moving, eyes darting as he sought an escape. "We have to get out," he urged, and his urgency echoed my own fears. But as we tried to retrace our steps, the house felt like it was shifting, changing its layout as if it were alive. With each passing moment, the air thickened, and I could feel the weight of something ancient pressing against us. What had begun as an urgent call for help was transforming into a nightmare I couldn't escape. "We'll find a way out," I told myself, but deep down, I felt the truth creeping in. This house had secrets, and it didn't want us to leave. I could feel my pulse quicken as I turned back toward the hallway. The house had a way of making me feel trapped, as if its walls were closing in. "Where do we go from here?" I asked Mark, anxiety creeping into my voice. He shook his head, glancing around as if the answer might appear in the shadows. "We need to keep moving. We can't stay here." I nodded, though every instinct told me to run. We retraced our steps, but it felt like the house had transformed. The familiar layout shifted into a maze of unfamiliar rooms. The wallpaper peeled back like old skin, revealing something dark and rotten underneath. "This place is wrong," I said, my words barely a whisper. Mark didn't respond, but the furrow in his brow told me he felt it too. It was more than just an eerie atmosphere. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake. I led the way, my breath quickening as I opened another door. It opened to a narrow stairway leading down into darkness. "You think we should go down there?" Mark asked, hesitating at the threshold. I felt a pull, a curiosity that both frightened and intrigued me. "We might find a way out," I said, trying to sound convincing. Deep down, I knew it was a gamble. As we descended, the air grew colder, wrapping around us like a damp shroud. The stairs creaked beneath our feet, each step feeling like a warning. I peered down into the void. "What if there's nothing down there?" Mark's voice quivered, his hesitation palpable. "What if it's worse?" I couldn't answer him. I just had to trust my gut and press on. At the bottom, we found ourselves in a dimly lit basement. The flickering overhead light cast eerie shadows that danced across the walls. "Is it just me, or does this place feel even more unsettling?" I muttered, stepping cautiously. A musty smell hung in the air, making me recoil slightly. Old furniture was piled haphazardly, and rusty tools lay scattered like forgotten relics. "This feels like a graveyard," Mark said, his voice barely above a murmur. Suddenly, something caught my eye, a small door tucked away in the corner. It looked just as worn as the others, but something about it drew me closer. "What do you think is behind it?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Mark shrugged, his expression torn between intrigue and fear. "I guess there's only one way to find out." The two of us approached, and my heart raced as I reached for the knob, every fiber of my being telling me to turn back. With a deep breath, I twisted the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dark room filled with boxes and old newspapers. A chill ran through me as I scanned the contents. Among the clutter lay items that looked oddly familiar, things from my childhood, trinkets I had lost over the years. "How is this possible?" I whispered, my mind racing with questions. Mark stepped back, visibly shaken. "This doesn't make any sense," he said, his voice cracking. As I examined the items, I felt a strange connection. Each piece told a story, fragments of memories I thought were long gone. But alongside the nostalgia came an unsettling feeling, like a thread pulling me deeper into something I didn't understand. "We should leave," Mark insisted, glancing nervously at the door behind us. But I felt rooted to the spot, caught in a web of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Just then, a loud bang echoed from above, jolting us both. "Did you hear that?" I asked, adrenaline coursing through me. Mark nodded, his eyes wide. "We need to go, now." The urgency in his tone snapped me back to reality. I grabbed a few of the items, as if clinging to the past could somehow protect us. We turned to leave, but the air felt charged, thick with an unspoken tension. It was as if the house was alive, pulling us back, unwilling to let go. As we hurried up the stairs, the shadows seemed to shift around us. I could feel something watching, waiting for the moment we let our guard down. The door at the top of the stairs was ajar, flickering light spilling in. I pushed it open, but as we stepped through, the house let out a deep groan, shaking the very foundation beneath our feet. "What is happening?" I shouted, my voice barely carrying over the noise. Mark grabbed my arm, pulling me forward. In that moment, I realized we were not just escaping a house. We were fleeing something far more sinister, a force woven into the very fabric of the place. I could only hope we could escape its grasp before it was too late. Each step felt like a countdown, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the house had more secrets to reveal if we could just survive long enough to uncover them. The pounding in my chest echoed my hurried steps as we emerged from the basement. The house creaked and groaned like an old man trying to stand, and I could feel its weight pressing down on us. "We need to get out," I said, urgency flooding my voice. Mark agreed, his eyes darting nervously around. But where to go? The layout had twisted into a labyrinth, and each turn felt like an invitation to something dark. As we made our way back through the corridor, the walls seemed to pulse, almost breathing. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like a predator stalking its prey. "Do you feel that?" I asked, glancing over my shoulder. Mark nodded, his face pale. "It's like the house knows we're trying to leave." I couldn't help but think of stories I'd heard, people trapped in places, unable to escape because the building itself held them captive. We rounded a corner and stopped in front of a tall window, thick with dust. Outside, the sky had turned a deep gray, and the wind picked up, rattling the glass. I pressed my hands against the cold surface, straining to see beyond the creeping shadows. "If we can just get to the car, we'll be okay," I murmured, but doubt gnawed at me. The car felt like a world away, buried beneath the weight of this house's secrets. Mark moved closer, his breath quickening. "Let's keep going. We can't let it win." His determination sparked something in me, a flicker of hope amid the rising dread. We took a deep breath and pushed forward, but every creak of the floorboards echoed like a warning bell, telling us to turn back. I could feel a cold sweat forming on my brow as we reached another door, this one slightly ajar. I hesitated, the sight of the darkened room beyond making my skin crawl. "What if something's in there?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. We had to face it. "We can't keep avoiding it. We need to know," Mark replied, his voice steady despite the fear etched across his features. Together, we stepped inside, the door creaking ominously behind us. The room was smaller than I expected, cluttered with furniture covered in sheets like ghosts. A large mirror dominated one wall, reflecting our frightened faces. "Look at that," I said, pointing. "It's like we're looking at ourselves in a warped reality." As I approached, the air grew thick, and the mirror began to ripple. I felt an overwhelming urge to touch the glass, to see what lay on the other side. Suddenly, the mirror shattered, the sound piercing through the air like a gunshot. Glass sprayed everywhere, and I stumbled back, instinctively shielding my face. "What just happened?" Mark shouted, panic rising in his voice. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the house was fighting back, and we were losing. Amidst the chaos, I caught a glimpse of something in the reflection before it faded. A shadowy figure lingered just behind us, its presence suffocating. "Did you see that?" I gasped, turning around, but the room was empty. "What are we doing here? We need to go." Mark's words struck a chord deep within me. It was time to confront whatever this place had to offer. As we turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. "We're trapped," I shouted, but my voice felt distant, swallowed by the house's dark embrace. In that moment, I knew it was more than just a house. It was a prison of our own fears, feeding off our anxieties and doubts. I grabbed the doorknob, twisting it frantically, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. "Think, we can't let it win," I urged Mark, desperate for a plan. As I turned, my eyes caught the scattered pieces of the shattered mirror. In that instant, a thought struck me. What if we face it? What if we confront whatever is behind this? Mark looked at me, uncertainty clouding his features. "Are you sure?" But deep down, I knew there was no other choice. I took a step closer to the mirror shards, feeling a pull, an urge to piece together what had been broken. "We have to break this hold it has on us," I said, my voice steadying. As I began to gather the fragments, the room began to shift. The shadows seemed to dance, swirling around us like a dark storm. I could hear whispers growing louder, calling my name, urging me to stop, but I pressed on, determined to reclaim my freedom. As I pieced the glass together, a jarring vision flooded my mind. Moments from my past, mistakes I'd buried, fears I'd ignored. The more I faced, the more powerful the house became, pushing me toward a breaking point. And just when I thought I could overcome it, the door burst open, and I found myself staring into a dark void. In that terrifying moment, the realization hit me hard. The house didn't want me to leave. It wanted me to stay and confront the darkness within myself. I had to choose, embrace my fears or remain trapped forever. As I stood at the edge, the shadows closing in, I understood that the true horror lay not in the house itself, but in the depths of my own mind. It was a clear Saturday afternoon when the call came in. I was still getting the hang of things as a paramedic, adrenaline coursing through my veins from the excitement of the day. We received a report about a cyclist who had crashed into a car. They described him as moving at an insane speed, which instantly raised alarms. I threw on my gear, jumped into the ambulance, and glanced at my partner, who nodded back at me. We had to get there fast. Driving through the quiet suburb, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Typically, a serious accident would draw a crowd. People would gather, some offering help, while others dialed 911. But as we approached the scene, I noticed the streets were eerily empty, almost like a scene from a bad movie. No one was around. I glanced at my partner. "Where is everybody?" I asked, my voice tinged with confusion. He shrugged, clearly as perplexed as I was. When we arrived, I felt my heart drop. The cyclist lay on the asphalt, his body twisted and unmoving. The sight was horrific. His skull was practically crushed, blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the pavement. I had seen my share of injuries, but this was something else entirely. I knelt beside him, scanning his face. His eyes were shut, and his mouth was smeared with crimson. "How did no one come to help him?" I muttered, almost to myself. I leaned in closer, hoping to find some sign of life. There were no reassuring sounds, no breathing, no pulse, just the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding us. My partner checked the victim's wrist for a pulse, his brow furrowed in concentration. I could see the concern etched on his face, and for a brief moment I thought we might not be alone in this horror. Then it happened. My partner stood up abruptly, his eyes wide with disbelief. Just as he was about to speak, the cyclist surged upward, almost as if he had been pulled by an invisible string. It was surreal. He didn't use his arms to push himself up. He just leaped to his feet, grinning. My heart raced as I processed what was happening. I glanced at my partner, his jaw hanging open, unable to articulate the shock we both felt. "What the hell?" I whispered. The cyclist darted past us, moving with a speed that defied logic. He didn't even grab his bike. Instead, he sprinted toward the dense line of trees at the edge of the road. My instincts screamed at me to follow him, but I hesitated. My partner stood frozen, the color draining from his face. "He didn't have a pulse, man," he finally murmured, disbelief lacing his words. I felt my stomach twist. How could someone so gravely injured spring back to life like that? We exchanged glances, and I sensed the unease hanging in the air between us. "Did we just see what I think we saw?" I asked, trying to make sense of it all. My partner shook his head. "He shouldn't be able to move like that." The air felt electric, charged with an unnamable tension. I felt an urge to run after him, to understand how someone with such catastrophic injuries could be on his feet. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the distant rustling of the leaves, a reminder of the forest that beckoned just beyond the road. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. We were supposed to save people, not witness the impossible. The situation felt unreal, like I had stepped into a nightmare where logic no longer applied. After a moment of hesitation, I grabbed the radio and called for backup, knowing we needed help to figure this out. My partner remained transfixed, staring into the woods where the cyclist had vanished. The unease settled deeper within me as I contemplated what would come next. Whatever was happening here felt bigger than either of us. And as I waited for the authorities to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers lay hidden just beyond the trees, waiting to be uncovered. As I waited for backup, my mind raced through the possibilities of what had just happened. The cyclist, he should have been in agony, yet he leaped to his feet like a character in a horror film, defying everything we understood about injuries. I couldn't shake the image of his broken body from my mind. "What do you think is going on?" I asked my partner, trying to get a grip on the surreal nature of the moment. He shook his head again, still staring into the forest where the cyclist had vanished. "I have no idea, man. It's like he was never hurt at all." The minutes dragged on, stretching out into what felt like an eternity. I could feel my pulse in my ears, a relentless reminder that something wasn't right. My partner finally broke the silence. "You think he'll be okay?" he asked, his voice shaky. "I mean, he looked dead. How could he just—" He trailed off, unable to finish his thought. "People do weird things in shock," I replied, though my own words felt hollow. Was this shock, or was there something more sinister at play? As the sirens wailed in the distance, I surveyed the scene, searching for any sign of the cyclist. The pavement was still slick with his blood, a reminder of the trauma that had just occurred. I knew how traumatic brain injuries could mess with a person's perception. Maybe he had been delirious, thinking he could run away from a situation he couldn't fully comprehend. But that didn't explain how he had stood up after we checked for a pulse. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. The search and rescue team arrived, a group of focused individuals ready to tackle the task at hand. Their presence brought a slight relief, a sense of order amidst the chaos. "What's the story?" one of them asked, looking from me to my partner. I quickly relayed what had happened. He was dead, no pulse, then he just jumped up and ran into the woods. The team exchanged glances, some rolling their eyes as if dismissing my words as the ramblings of an overworked paramedic. "Let's see if we can track him down," one of them said, and they moved into action. As they ventured into the trees, I felt a pull to follow them. I couldn't shake the need to understand what had just happened. It was as if an invisible thread connected me to that cyclist, as if I needed to know where he had gone. I caught my partner's eye, and he seemed to read my thoughts. "You're not seriously thinking of going in there, are you?" he asked, worry lining his features. "What if we find him? What if he needs help?" I shot back, frustration bubbling under the surface. I knew I shouldn't go alone, but curiosity was overwhelming. In a moment of hesitation, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the shadows of the trees. The air felt different inside the woods, cooler, almost dense, as if it was holding its breath. Each step felt deliberate, my feet crunching softly on the twigs and leaves. I called out for the cyclist, hoping he could hear me. "Hey, can you hear me?" No answer came, just the rustle of leaves, a reminder that I was utterly alone in this tangled mess of underbrush and fear. The deeper I went, the more unnerved I became. I expected to see signs of him, blood on the ground, perhaps a broken branch where he had pushed through. But there was nothing, just silence. I had read enough horror stories to know this was the part where things often went terribly wrong. What if he's hurt worse than we thought? I whispered to myself, the words hanging in the air. A creeping sense of dread began to settle in my gut. Suddenly, a sound pierced the stillness, a faint rustling, followed by a soft call. "Help me." The voice was weak, almost unrecognizable. I turned my flashlight toward the sound, and for a moment, hope flared inside me. "I'm coming," I shouted, pushing through the underbrush. My heart raced, a mix of fear and anticipation driving me forward. Who was calling out? Was it the cyclist, or something more terrifying? Just as I rounded a thick cluster of trees, I spotted something up ahead. My heart stopped. There, half hidden in the shadows, was the cyclist, but something was off. He was hunched over, not moving, his body still as stone. I hesitated, the earlier adrenaline replaced by caution. I knew I had to approach carefully, but the moment I took a step forward, he lifted his head. The grin he wore sent chills down my spine. It was the same smile, but now it felt wrong, distorted, almost menacing. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but curiosity held me in place, frozen, on the precipice of something I could not yet comprehend. As I stood there, paralyzed by the sight of him, the world around me blurred into a distant hum. "What are you doing?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. His grin widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp for comfort. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice smooth, almost inviting. I took a cautious step back, my instincts screaming at me to flee. "You shouldn't have come here," he continued, tilting his head as if studying me. "But now that you're here, you might as well stay a while." Panic gripped me, and every horror story I had ever heard flashed through my mind. He looked human, but something in his demeanor was off. "Where's the blood?" I asked, my heart racing. "You should be hurt. You should be—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "You see, that's the beauty of it," he interrupted, his voice low and almost conspiratorial. "Pain is just a game. Some people don't understand that." His words twisted in my stomach. This wasn't just about a horrific accident anymore. This was something darker, something primal. "I need to call for help," I stated, though I wasn't sure what help could do against whatever was happening here. He laughed softly, a sound devoid of humor. "Help? For what? This is just the beginning. You're already part of it." He pointed to the forest surrounding us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees were watching, as if they were witnesses to this grotesque play. I glanced behind me, wondering if my partner had noticed my absence, but the shadows swallowed my thoughts. "Listen, just tell me what's going on," I pleaded, my voice shaking. "Why did you run? Why did you act like I was dead?" he interrupted again, his eyes gleaming with something I couldn't decipher. "That's the trick, isn't it? To show you how fragile life can be. One moment, everything is normal, and the next—" He trailed off, leaving a chilling silence in his wake. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me, like the world was tilting, and I was about to fall. "Let me go," I said, trying to keep my tone firm. "I don't want any part of this." But deep down, curiosity wrestled with my fear. Who was this man? What did he want? "You can't leave now," he replied, stepping closer, invading my personal space. "You're here, and you've seen too much. The real horror is not what you see, but what you choose to ignore." The air felt charged, heavy with unspoken threats, and every instinct told me to run, yet my feet remained planted. "Are you saying I'm trapped?" I asked, my voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You could say that," he answered, the grin never fading. "But think of it as an opportunity. You'll understand soon enough. Life has a way of revealing its truths." I could feel my pulse quickening. What kind of twisted logic was he trying to impose on me? "I don't want to understand your truth," I snapped, forcing myself to stand tall. "You're sick." His laughter echoed in the stillness, mocking my defiance. "You think you know what sickness is? You haven't seen anything yet." In that moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. I was no longer just a witness. I was part of something far more sinister. I needed to find a way out, but the path behind me was now obscured by the darkness that seemed to stretch endlessly. "Get away from me," I shouted, taking another step back, but the ground felt unsteady beneath my feet. He tilted his head, eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and menace. "You can run, but where will you go? There's nowhere to escape." The truth of his words weighed heavily in the air. I glanced back once more, yearning for the safety of the world I knew, but the darkness beckoned me further into its depths. Desperation clawed at my insides. "I'll scream if I have to," I threatened, but even I could hear the weakness in my voice. "Go ahead," he said, his smile widening. "No one will come. Not here. Not ever." As I felt the panic rising, I turned to run, pushing through the trees, fueled by instinct and sheer terror. But the deeper I went, the more disoriented I became. The woods twisted into a maze, and I was lost in a nightmare with no end in sight. I stumbled into a clearing, and that's when I saw it, a broken-down cabin, weathered and leaning precariously to one side. I could hear the faintest sound of rustling from inside, and dread settled like a thick fog. I hesitated, knowing that whatever awaited me in there could be even worse than what I'd just escaped. But my heart beat in my throat. I had to know. I had to confront whatever horror lay ahead. And in that moment, I was driven by something deeper than fear, an unquenchable thirst for answers. As I approached the cabin, the air around me shifted. The structure leaned to one side, almost as if it was trying to hide from the surrounding woods. The wooden door hung ajar, creaking gently as if inviting me in. My heart raced, a mix of fear and curiosity pushing me forward. I stepped inside, the dim light barely illuminating the dust-covered floor. Old furniture lay in disarray, remnants of a life once lived. I could almost hear the echoes of conversations that had taken place here, mingled with the decay of time. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling as it bounced off the walls. No answer came, just the faint sound of something shifting deeper in the cabin. The hairs on my neck stood on end. "Anyone here?" I pressed, straining to catch a reply. I knew I might be alone, yet a sense of urgency compelled me to explore. Something wasn't right, and I had to uncover the truth. As I moved deeper into the room, I noticed a flickering light from a small window. I drew closer, and the glow revealed a tattered photograph hanging crookedly on the wall. It was a family, smiling faces frozen in a moment of happiness. But their eyes, they seemed hollow, as if they knew secrets I was yet to understand. "What happened to you?" I murmured, feeling a strange connection to their lost joy. The longer I stared, the more I felt the weight of their past pressing down on me. A sound broke my reverie, soft footsteps from above. My heart jumped. Who else could be here? I glanced around, searching for something, anything, to defend myself if needed. I spotted an old fireplace poker lying in the corner. I grabbed it, feeling the cold metal chill my palm. "Who's up there?" I shouted, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. My voice echoed back, met only with silence. With cautious steps, I ascended the creaking staircase. Each step felt like a countdown, and I could feel adrenaline surging through me. As I reached the top, I peered down a narrow hallway. A door at the end stood slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me. My instincts screamed for me to turn back, yet something deeper urged me on. I had to know what lurked behind that door. I took a deep breath and approached the room, my pulse quickening with each step. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside. The air felt charged, thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something metallic. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I froze. The room was a chaotic jumble of old newspapers and furniture, but what caught my eye was the mirror mounted on the wall, reflecting an unsettling distortion of the room. I moved closer, drawn to its surface. It wasn't just a mirror, it felt alive, pulsing with energy. I leaned in, and the reflection shifted. Instead of my face, I saw that man from the woods, his twisted grin stretching wider. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice echoing as if he were right beside me. My breath caught in my throat. How was this possible? I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a broken chair. "This isn't real," I whispered to myself, shaking my head as if I could will the vision away. But it didn't disappear. "It's just a trick." Yet the longer I looked, the more I felt the pull of that mirror, like it was calling me into its depths. "Get out!" I shouted, trying to shake the feeling, but my words fell flat against the walls. I was trapped in this nightmare, with no idea how to escape. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged through my veins. "Let me out!" I pounded on the wood, but it wouldn't budge. My breaths quickened, and I could feel the walls closing in. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the mirror again. The man was still there, watching, waiting. I couldn't take it anymore. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, desperation spilling out. His laughter echoed, chilling my bones. "What do I want? I want you to see the truth." I felt my legs give way as the weight of his words sank in. The truth? What truth was he talking about? I leaned closer to the mirror, fear and curiosity waging war within me. If I had to face whatever horror lay in that reflection, I would. I had no other choice. The cabin, the man, the mirror, it all felt like a twisted game, and I was determined to uncover the rules before it was too late. I stared into the mirror, my heart racing. "What truth?" I demanded, my voice shaky but defiant. The man's smile widened, an unsettling twist of malice and amusement. "The truth you seek lies within, but you must be willing to look." His words echoed, resonating in the depths of my mind. I could feel the walls pressing in, urging me to flee, but something compelled me to stand my ground. "What do you know about me?" I pressed, desperate for answers, knowing full well I was teetering on the brink of something terrible. Suddenly, memories surged like a tidal wave, flooding my thoughts. I recalled the arguments with friends, the doubts about my choices. I thought about the time I had ignored the warning signs, convinced I was strong enough to handle anything. I was fooling myself. The man in the mirror seemed to know every misstep, every regret. "You're just a reflection," I said, trying to regain control. "You're not real." But even as I said it, I felt the grip of reality slipping away. "Am I not?" he shot back, the taunting lilt in his voice sending chills down my spine. "You brought me here with your own doubts, your fears. I am the part of you that you refuse to confront." I took a step back, grappling with his words. Could it be true? Did my own mind conjure this nightmare? "I didn't ask for you to come," I retorted, clenching the poker tighter. "You're just a figment of my imagination." "Are you sure?" he asked, his tone shifting, darkening. The room warped around me, shadows lengthening, warping into grotesque shapes. I could feel the air thicken as I fought to catch my breath. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about fear. It was about acceptance. I had to face whatever darkness resided within me. "You don't scare me," I said, my voice steadier now, though I could feel my pulse quickening. "I'm not afraid of you." Yet as I spoke, doubt crept in. Was that truly the case? I had hidden from my failures for too long. I had allowed fear to shape my life. And now it loomed larger than ever. The reflection laughed again, the sound growing louder, almost mocking. "Fear is a powerful thing," he said. "It keeps you from seeing what's right in front of you. It has shackled you, and now you'll pay the price." With each passing second, the tension escalated, and the reflection shifted again, morphing into an image of me, broken and defeated. I gripped the poker harder, feeling the metal bite into my palm. "This ends now," I shouted, lunging at the mirror, hoping to shatter the illusion. But as I struck the surface, it rippled like water, and instead of breaking, it pulled me in, engulfing me in darkness. Suddenly, I was inside the mirror, standing in a room that mirrored my own but felt distinctly wrong. The shadows whispered, taunting me, and I stumbled backward. "What is this place?" I gasped, realization dawning. It was a manifestation of my fears, the arguments, the regrets, the moments I chose silence over confrontation. This was a prison of my own making, a twisted reflection of my mind. "You can't escape yourself," the man's voice echoed, now a part of the very walls. Panic surged through me as I struggled to find a way out. "No, I can change. I don't have to live like this," I cried, desperation clawing at my throat. I turned, searching for a way back, but the landscape shifted, trapping me in an endless loop of my own creation. I could feel my sanity fraying as I was forced to confront every dark corner I had buried. In that moment, clarity struck. "I choose to face this," I declared, the weight of acceptance settling over me. I realized that the only way out was through the darkness. I had to confront my fears, not as enemies, but as part of me. "You are me, and I am you," I said firmly, staring into the abyss of my reflection. The man's grin faded, replaced by an expression of understanding. "Finally," he whispered, his voice softening. "Now you can be free." Just as I felt a shift in the air, the ground beneath me gave way, and I was pulled back into the cabin, landing hard on the floor. I gasped, disoriented, staring at the mirror as it settled back into its normal state. The man was gone, but I knew he was still there, woven into the fabric of my being. I had escaped, but at a cost. The truth was now a part of me, and the darkness would always linger, a reminder of the shadows I had faced.